Hi folks, today I'm going to show you how to draw 5 different styles of mountains for your fantasy maps. They're all really easy, they're suitable for beginners. You're going to need a pencil, a piece of paper and 2 pens, one thicker than the other. You can do it with 1 pen, but 2 does make your life a bit easier. There's links in the description below for the pens that I'm using and the paper and everything else. Right, you ready? Let's get on with it. First up, we're going to draw a ridgeline mountain. This is a really important technique, and once you've mastered this flows into all the rest of the techniques we're going to use. We start with a simple line guiding us where our mountains are going to go, and then off that line we'll just draw some lines coming down, and that gives us a simple ridge, right? This one looks a bit crap, so let's do a line that's a bit more wavy and see how that looks. Now with our wavy line, every time there's a little corner we can run our line sweeping off it as the side of the mountains. This is starting to look a little bit better, but it's still not very exciting. So let's make a line that's much more jagged now. In this jagged line, it helps to have lots of vertical points. So everywhere where there's a little peak or corner, we'll run our lines off it yet again. The longer the lines we draw, the higher the mountains they are. So we can do shorter lines at each end to let the sort of ridge line tail off into the ground, and then longer lines in the middle to make them higher. That's looking loads better than the first one, I think, already. So all we can do is just add a little bit of shading. I'm going to shade everything on the right hand side in this tutorial. So we'd imagine the sun coming from the left. Alright, next up we're going to focus on drawing mountains based on their outline. So we're going to start with our guiding line, and then from the bottom up we'll just draw the rough shapes of mountains that we want. So now we've done our shapes, we can draw in the ridge lines. Now these ridge lines are going to be nice wavy lines that come down from the centre of the highest peak on each mountain. And just like in tutorial 1, the wavier these are, the more jagged it's going to look. And then from each ridge line we'll draw a line that sort of runs parallel to the edge of the mountain, so it keeps the kind of general contour of the mountain. So I'll go and quickly do the rest of these and we'll move on to the next one. So for this technique we're going to join up the mountains by the ridge lines. This is a technique I learned from Josh at mapeffects.co, but all we're going to do is draw the outside of one mountain at the back. And then from the centre point of that mountain we're going to draw a ridge line that then forms the peak of the next one. And just where that peak hits its highest point, then we're going to draw another ridge line coming from that peak. That's going to be the next mountain, and so forth. And once we've done our main outlines, we'll just go in and add our vertical lines coming down, again following the contour of the mountain in front or behind it. Okay, so moving on to technique 4, these are going to be simple individual shapes. They're going to be quite smooth, and what we're going to do is we're not going to actually draw a ridgeline in ink, but we're going to just let the shading imply the ridgeline. So I like to start with foothills and then develop those foothills into mountains as we get further towards the middle of the range. Finally, all we need to do at this pencil stage is draw a really rough ridgeline on each of the peaks. This doesn't have to be perfect, you can just sort of sketch this in loosely, because all this is going to be is just a guide for where our shading is going to go. For the 5th technique, we're going to draw snowy ranges. We'll start with a really nice jagged shape of a mountain. I forgot to draw in the guiding line for this, so we just have to go with it as it is. For this one we are going to draw a ridge line, but we're going to let it sort of hang a bit more loosely down the side of the mountain. That's because we're going to try and give the effect of snow, and snow would have light on the very top, and then the shadow would be set a bit further off the side. Right, before we move on to inking, have a think about which one you like the best at the moment. I'd be really interested to know which is your favourite right now, and then let's compare that when we get to the end when we ink them in. So to do inking on technique 1, we're just going to take our thicker pen and we'll just draw the ridgeline just like we did in pencil at the beginning. Using quite light pressure, we can draw the lines coming off each of those sort of corners on the ridge. And I like to let the pen almost just barely touch the paper as I'm doing this, and you get a kind of dotted line, and it gives quite a nice broken effect. So for technique 2, when we were concentrating on the outlines to begin with, we're going to carry on inking the outside of the mountains first, again with our thicker pen. We're not going to draw the ridge lines just yet, we'll make sure we've got all the outlines done first. And then carrying on with just doing the outlines to begin with, for technique 3, again with our thicker pen, we'll do the first outline, and then from that centre point, just like we did in pencil, we'll draw the ridge line that comes down, and then adding a little pop to that ridge line forms the next peak in the range. And then technique 4, again, very easy, still with that thick pen, we'll just draw all those outlines. Finally, the same with technique 5. Make sure you keep that jagged effect on technique 5 because that's going to be important when we come back to it. So next we're going to look at how to do the shading. So we'll take our thinner pen now, and then on technique 1 we're just going to draw lots of lines all on the right hand side, almost just like we did with pencil as well. And then on the left hand side you can just add a little bit of extra detail with very light pen pressure. And there we go, that's the first technique, inked and shaded. Let's move on to number 2. So here we'll draw in our ridge lines with our thinner pen and draw on the little lines coming down from those ridges again with the same pen. We'll do exactly the same for technique 3. Off those ridge lines using the thinner pen, draw the little lines coming off the ridge and off the outer edges of the mountains. Make sure you follow the contour, so where it's steep, make sure the middle lines are steep as well. And then moving on to technique 4, because we're not going to draw in ridge lines on this one, so we're going to go straight onto the shading because the shading forms the ridge line. So you've probably seen this on some of my other tutorials, but just to the right of the little ridge line that you drew in pencil, we're just going to draw very light little lines, probably about 1 millimeter apart, and maybe get 5 or 6 on each hill, maybe a few more on the mountains, but you just keep them to the right hand side of the ridge line, and that's all there is to it. Finally, on the 5th technique, we're going to use something similar to what we did on number 4, but we're going to use a lot more lines. We're going to almost shade very lightly with that 05 thickness brush, and we're going to do that again to the right of the ridge lines that we drew. And each time we drew that sort of more vertical line coming off the ridge, we're going to use that as the starting point, as the outer edge for the shading. So with this you can go over it a couple of times, get those sort of edges nice and black. The black is going to give a nice contrast and make it look a little bit more snowy. So to add a finishing touch to these, we'll just draw some smaller little ridge lines in the more white areas, just with a couple of little vertical lines coming off, and then we'll shade into these as well. And then adding a tiny little bit to the left hand side, can just kind of link up those so that it looks like little hills in front of it. Okay, so we can go through and rub out all our pencil lines, and then we'll get on to shading techniques 2 and 3 because we haven't done that yet. So the technique is the same on both. I don't know why I've decided to do 3 before 2, but again on the right hand side of each ridge you can take your thin pen and just draw some nice thin lines coming down on the right hand side of the ridges. Just make sure that your lines follow the contour of the mountain. And then we'll add one finishing touch to technique 4, which is just on the left hand side. We'll just add a few little bits of detail that just give it a bit more life. Okay, so there we go, 5 different styles. Which one's your favourite? Let me know in the comments. I really want to know which one you like the best. My favourite is top secret for now, but if you leave a comment, I might just tell you. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. There's going to be loads more videos coming up soon. I'll see you next time. Cheers.